We are continuing on with our NHL offseason plan series. We're now on the 21st ranked team for the NHL's regular season, the Columbus Blue Jackets. So what will the Blue Jackets be expected to do this offseason? What contracts are most pressing for them to look after? We'll discuss their offseason plan coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we're taking a look at the Columbus Blue Jackets and what their likely plans are for the NHL offseason. Of course, if you've been following along in this series, we break this down into 4 different segments. If you're new, I'll quickly explain to how this works. We're going to first recap the 21-22 season, just to get an idea of how things went. We're going to examine their salary cap space that they have to work with, what contracts are expiring, so who are their unrestricted or restricted free agents that they either need to re-sign or consider replacing, and what are the top burning questions facing this franchise. What are the biggest things they need to prioritize going into the summertime here? So let's first recap the 21-22 season here for the Blue Jackets. Of course, as I mentioned, they're the 21st ranked team, so we know they didn't have a great season, but overall, really considering what was expected of them, I don't think they did all that badly. They finished with a record of 37-38-7 for 81 points. They were a little ways outside of the playoffs, but this year in the Eastern Conference especially, the playoffs were kind of lopsided. All the teams that were in the playoffs were 100-plus points, so even though the Jackets were standings-wise not that far off the mark, point-wise, they were quite a big gap off the mark, and there really was a big discrepancy between those who moved forward into playoffs and all the rest of them that missed. Now, goals for, they scored 258 for 14th best. That's not too bad. At least they're in the top half of the league, so they're, right around league average. Goals against, though, wasn't great. They did allow too many. They gave up 297 goals for 28th best. So the team defense, goaltending needs to get better next year. The power play was a little bit on the weaker side of things, 24th best in the NHL at 18.6%. The penalty kill was a little bit better, but not crazy good, but it was, closer to being respectable here at 78.6. for 20th best. Ideally, you want your power play in your PK. You want those two numbers to add up to 100% or more. 100% is kind of like your minimum to be, above league average or be in that respectable territory. So clearly, that's a little bit short on that accomplishment there. Of course, throughout the season, they did trade Max Domi. Otherwise, they didn't do anything too significant when it comes to roster adjustments. They had a first-year head coach, so we don't really expect a whole lot in changes in that way. Of course, Jarmo Kekalainen, the longtime GM, remains at the helm here. So let's take a look at the salary cap space and see where the Jackets finished and what they have on the books here going into next year. They finished the 21-22 season with $10.76 million available. So that's pretty good. At least they're not tight to the cap. They're one of the teams that does have a little bit of flexibility. Going into next year, they have 15 contracts on the books, totaling $54.3 million, which gives them $28.1 million available. So that's a relatively good spot to be in. Now, as we go through the next segment, we look at the contracts that are expiring. Some of these players are going to be making a decent amount of money, so it will eat into that $28 million in a fairly quick manner, but still, at the end of the day, they're not scrambling here like some teams around the NHL. So let's now jump over to the next segment. We'll look at their list of restricted and unrestricted free agents. So who needs a new contract or needs to be replaced? On the RFA side of things, they have some interesting names, which tops the list by Patrick Laine. Of course, he's a big-time player for them, a big-time goal scorer who's trying to find his long-term home, you could say. So we'll discuss him a bit more in the next segment here, but he certainly headlines all of their expired deals. You get Jack Roslovic, who came over in a trade with Laine from Winnipeg, who's been, at times when he first arrived was really, really good, but, by the end of the year and parts of last year, wasn't really the most consistent and kind of found himself demoted quite a bit. Emil Benstrom's an RFA as well. Carson Meyer. Liam Foudy, their former first-round pick from a few years ago, who spent the bulk of the year in the minors. I wonder what the future holds for Liam. Obviously didn't get much opportunity this year, so I'm not sure how the organization views him. Nick Blankenburg, who came over as a college signing at the end of the year, signed a one-year deal, which that contract's now expired, so he needs a new one already. He was a nice fit and actually worked out pretty good, so I know he'll be a defenseman on their team next year. I have no doubt about that. Also have Adam Boqvist, who is definitely going to be re-signed, Gabriel Carlson, and goaltender Daniil Tarasov. So I would expect that the majority of those RFAs at least are going to be signed to a new deal and at least get their qualifying offers. A couple of them, though, like I said, like Foodie, for example, a little bit debatable. I'm not sure what will happen with him for the future. On the UFA side of things, nothing too crazy here, but they do have Brendan Gaunce, defenseman Dean Kukin, goalie Jonas Korpisalo, and another goalie in JF Berube. Now, what are the top burning questions facing the Blue Jackets going into the summertime here? Well, first up, as I mentioned, the future of Patrick Laine is first and foremost at the forefront here. Obviously, do they want to sign him long-term? Will they do a short-term deal? Could he be traded? I don't know. I think a trade only happens if contract negotiations really go poorly and end up in some kind of a dispute, which I don't really expect. Laine at this point in his career would be an RFA with arbitration rights. So worst case scenario, they go to arbitration and get it settled that way. But of course, if it goes through arbitration, it's a short-term contract. Whereas maybe the Blue Jackets, have they decided and seen enough that they want to sign him longer term? And if so, what kind of money are we talking about here? I mean, he hasn't been the 40 goal scorer like he was early in his career. He's still a very productive player, and he could probably get back to that, but it's going to be difficult to get a long-term contract with the money that reflects that, considering that he hasn't produced a 40-goal pace for a little while now. So I know like he did a one-year deal last year, betting on himself. Will he want to do that again? Are the Jackets comfortable with that? Or do they rather a long-term deal? I don't really know where Kekalainen and the organization stand on Patrick Laine, but to me, it's a big question mark. To me, there's no much point here. They've had him long enough. I don't see it going down as a one-year deal. You either sign him long-term and say he's a big part of the team's future and build around him, or you trade him and move on if you don't think that he is. It's just that simple, in my opinion. When it comes to some other questions here, goaltending is a big one too. I mean, you have Elvis Berzlikins, who signed for the next, I think it's like 4 years or whatever it is, like a longer-term deal. So you know he's going to be your starting goaltender. If Korpisalo is not back, which is expected, he probably leaves via free agency. Or do you bring up Tarasov? Or do you go to market? I'm not sure what you do. Clearly, Merzlikins has enough experience now, I think, that, he was a little bit older, mature goalie when he first came over anyway. So to me, I don't know what you do in that case. It depends on how you feel about the young goalie Tarasov, who needs a new contract anyway. Maybe you bring in a third goalie just for competition purposes to make sure you have a decent goalie at the AHL level. I don't know. But certainly the future of goaltending here is also a big priority that they need to get sorted out as well. Now, this team also has multiple first-round draft picks. So we saw last year they were able to grab Cole Sillinger, who jumped into the lineup right away, had an immediate impact. Now, I don't know if there's going to be able to be players that they can pick this year that are going to have that ability. Now, they do have 2 picks. The first one is the higher one of the two will be the one that they got from the Chicago Blackhawks in the Seth Jones trade. Of course, they have their own pick as well. So there's certainly situations that could present itself. Maybe they trade one of those picks for an impact player that can come in and help the team right away. I think it's fair to say that this team is a little bit thin at the center ice position. Jack Roslovic certainly is a center. Domi was a center. Domi's not there anymore. Roslovic hasn't been consistent. I know Boone Jenner plays a lot of center, but I mean, he's not your ideal number one center by any means. He had a good year, though, considering what his kind of offensive production is normally like. But still, they do need a top center to play with Laine. To me, if they're going to hold on to Laine and sign him longer term, you do need to figure out his line mates, and that's going to be a tricky situation. So, I mean, there's lots of different players out there. Obviously, his former teammate Mark Scheifele is rumored to be available. I don't know if they'd want to do that. I don't really know that Laine was fond of Scheifele and Wheeler from his time in Winnipeg, so I don't know that would be a wise idea. I'm just thinking of centers that would be available for trade because it's not a common thing, but certainly that type of player is what the Jackets need. Wouldn't be overly shocking if they use one of these picks if the right deal becomes available. If not, I expect them to continue to kind of add to the prospect pool here. Like I said, this year we saw them draft last year Cole Sillinger and have an impact this year. They got Kent Johnson at the draft as well. Of course, the Johnson signed after the college season. And he's, going to be a real good player by the looks of it. He had a taste of the NHL at the end of the season as well. Blankenberg came in too as a college player that just made the jump. So he's good. I mean, they have some good young blue liners with Werenski signed long term, and Boakfist and Jake Bean. Boakfist obviously needs a new deal, so they're building around that. But center ice is, to me, where they need the most help. I mean, they have Chinnikov's another young player that stepped in and did okay too, and he's only going to continue to get better. So to me, you got to look at what do they have for youth, where do they see these young guys taking spots next year, which will determine what other holes they might need to fill via either a few trades or free agency. I don't know that they really do a ton. To me, they got to get Laine signed, and they need ideally a center, a top 6 center. That's not easy to find. There's not usually at any given time many that are available, but where they have all these picks, that would be the main area that I would expect Jarmo Kekalainen to attack. Now, if deals don't materialize, maybe they're going to try to draft somebody that they feel would be, able to grow into that. I'm not sure. See, the problem here is where they're picking in the draft. They're at number 6 and number 12, with the number 6 pick being the Hawks pick. I don't know that they can get themselves a center there that's going to be, able to make the jump to the NHL for a few years. I mean, the main 2 centers at the top of the draft are Logan Cooley and Shane Wright. Of course, Wright's expected to go 1. Cooley's probably going to go 2 or 3. Juraj Slavkovsky, another top player up there. Maybe they can get a guy like Kamel, who's a Finn. Good, looks to be a pretty good scoring winger. That's about now. When I talk about center ice too, I mean, Kent Johnson could be one of those top 6 centers, and that is possible. But I still think that not everybody you draft at center is going to be a center. So when you look at some of their younger players, it's just not for sure thing that they will. So they can look at what they have between Sillinger and Johnson and these guys and say, okay, we feel that they slot best here. Maybe let's grab here. But at number 6, to me, they probably have to take the best player available if they hold that pick. And it's debatable on who that's going to be. There could be some interesting defensemen there. There could be some interesting forwards there. So that's going to be a big part of their summer, is kind of zeroing in on who is their player with those picks. Who do they think they can target? And is there any better trades out there to give them an impact player right away? On top of that, with goaltending, Patrick Laine, those are the main items I expect to keep Jarmo Kekalainen and the Jackets busy going into next year. With all that, if they can accomplish getting another center, add a little bit more youth into this lineup, another goaltender, they can certainly take some strides forward and be a stronger team than they were this past season. Let me know what you think are the top questions they need to address in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Stay tuned for the remaining 20 teams coming in this series over the next number of days as teams are eliminated from the playoffs. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.